All right, guys. Good morning. Happy Thursday in August. I know it's been a long week, so welcome to session 3 of the new Analyst Series. This will be one of the shorter presentations. We don't have a whole lot of slides, but so I hope to keep it like under an hour. As always, feel free to jump in with any questions, and I'll try to pause and give you some time to ask those questions as well. As always, this is a list of all of the personnel in our office. I've bumped up the non-faculty analysts. They're listed here in the middle. As I've mentioned before, the assignments are changing a little bit, but these are your contacts for now. Sonia is our newest analyst. I don't think she's transitioned fully over yet, but she will be here soon, and we're very excited about that. In case you didn't know, Dr. Yokomori is the dean that is assigned to review and approve the non-faculty series. So in this session, we're going to be talking about postdocs, and Dr. Yokomori is the one that reviews all of our postdoc files. Starting off, here are some resources that you can use when working on postdoc files. And really anything and everything that you want to know is going to be on this webpage here. We have all of the checklists, not we, but AP has all of the checklists, all of the salary scales, information about layoffs, FAQs. The contract is also there. Well, actually, let me back up. The FAQs are being revised, so they're not linked up anymore on that webpage. But really, and if you want to learn about postdocs, it's all right there. And I do recommend, reading through some of the things I just listed, as well as reading through the contract. The contract is very long, and there are sections that maybe are not as applicable to putting a file together, but I would recommend reading things like the criteria for appointment, the salary section, and maybe like the PTO section. Those are the top 3 that I would recommend, and also like the appointment terms. So 4 sections, because those are really the sections that govern kind of what we do as far as a file. And those are where most of the questions come from with regard to postdocs. Okay, here's a list of all of the titles that we use for postdocs. These titles are also listed on that title codes document that I shared in previous presentations. The first one is postdoc employee. This is the most common postdoctoral fellow title or postdoc appointee title. And with this title code, this means that this postdoc is our employee. They're paid via the UC Irvine payroll system, and the funds might come from the PI's own grants, and the check is derived from UC Irvine payroll. 3253 is a postdoc fellow. In this situation, the postdoc is also paid via the UCI payroll system, but their appointment and either all or part of their appointment is funded by a training fellowship or grant. So the money to pay for their appointment comes from an outside agency. And these files, when they come forward, they must come forward with an agency fund letter so that our office can see what exactly the funds are that are going to be paying this individual. The third type of postdoc is a postdoc paid direct. And this is the type of postdoc that is coming to UCI to work for us with their own funds. They are always paid directly by an extramural agency. Sometimes they come from a different country, and sometimes the governmental agency is paying them. And the payment does not go through the UCI payroll system. They get those funds directly, to them. For both of these types, the fellow and the paid direct, if the funding is below UC Irvine salary scale threshold, the department must supplement pay. So they usually provide a supplement to that pay with the postdoc employee title code. So sometimes you'll see postdoc fellow / postdoc employee, postdoc paid direct / postdoc employee. So just know that we always have to meet the minimum threshold on the salary scales, whether or not this person is coming with their own funds or whether they're being paid by UCI directly. With both of these types of postdocs, again, fellow and paid direct, they both must include the agency letter. As I mentioned, paid directs many times are sometimes foreign, they come from outside the country, and we need an English translated agency letter, and we need the currency converted to US dollars. So make sure to look out for that. There are two other kinds of postdoc titles that we don't use very often at all. The first one is a 3255. I don't think I've ever seen anybody use this title. If you have questions about it, just contact your dean's analyst. Same thing with the 3256 postdoc interim. I believe we have used this one time or two times maybe. It's for UC graduates that are transitioning. If you think you might need to use that title code, please contact us again and we can help you with that. Okay, this is a snapshot of the current salary scale that was in effect on April 1st. The scale has an adjustment every year per the contract on October 1st. So you'll see we have a projected scale and what it might look like on 10/1. The final scale will be posted by UCOP and by AP as we get closer to that date. But they did provide us the projected scale so that departments can use those numbers for planning purposes. And this, again, is available on the postdoc page on AP's website. Just a reminder on salary scales, I've linked directly to the scale here. Another reminder is if you would like assistance on planning, the progression of your postdoc, throughout the salary scale over time, if they have a 2-year or maybe 3-year or something appointment, you can email Anna Avila in academic personnel, and she can give you a postdoc experience range calculator. It's an Excel spreadsheet, and you punch in all the data, and then it spits out the different salary levels and level increases that may occur over the postdoc's appointment timeframe. Another reminder is that initial appointments should be to the level which corresponds to the months of previous postdoctoral experience. What is new with this new contract is that postdocs level up to the next level either on April 1st or October 1st, depending on their hire date. And when I say level up, I mean, sorry, this is small, but they move from level, let's say 0 to level 1 or level 1 to level 2 as on an annual basis. So their initial appointment might be to level 0 if, for example, if they have, let's say, 6 months of previous postdoc experience, they go to level 0. And then annually on either 4/1 or 10/1, depending on their initial appointment date, they would move up to level 1, level 2, level 3, and so on. And I mentioned this already, but the salary scale is adjusted each year on 10/1 for the life of the contract. And the contract is through, I believe, 2027. I had it on one of the slides. So if you've been here for a while, you might remember that postdocs used to level up on their anniversary date. So if they were hired on, January 15th, they would level up the next year on that anniversary date. That's no longer the case. So some of your postdocs might, if they level up on 4/1, they might get an increase to the next level on April 1st, and then they may also get that range adjustment on October 1st. If October 1st is their level up date, then they're getting that level up and the range adjustment at the same time. So just keep that in mind. When we're putting files together or putting the reappointment files together, there is no need on the form to use the 4/1 or 10/1 dates to show the level up or range increase. And I'll show you what that means on the form. AP just wants us to show the appointment or reappointment start and end dates. So we're not breaking down exactly when they get their increases or level ups. We just want to show the start and end date of the appointment or reappointment. One thing to keep in mind is to please make sure on the PX form, when you're filling it out, that the initial hire date and any end dates are correct on the form and in UC Path. If you have a postdoc, and this happens fairly often, but if you have a postdoc that, you were hoping to have start on a certain date and they start later than that date, we need a revision PX1 form and we need everybody to sign off on it. That needs to come to our office in a timely manner so that we can review and process it. And then that update to the start date and end date must be updated into payroll in a timely manner. The reason for this is, there's lots of reasons for it, but the first major reason is because that PX1 form is a contract. It shows the postdoc what their start and end dates are. Their initial hire date is important because that's the date that is tied in the payroll system to things like benefit and level increases. And so we need an accurate record on paper and in payroll. Most importantly, in UC Path, if you've looked at your postdocs before, they have an anniversary date listed. That date must be kept up to date annually. So you may have to go in and submit something to HR ServiceNow to ask that that anniversary date be updated with the current year. And this is important because UC Path uses that date to reset and reallocate PTO and sick leave accruals. Please make sure to make those updates before the anniversary date is reached. If it happens after that date, then it messes up their accruals in the system. If you need more information about that, let your dean's analyst know. I know AP, at least this past year, they had done an audit of all of the postdocs in the payroll system. And so they typically let us know if somebody doesn't have the correct date in UC Path. We want to be able to catch those before AP catches them, though. So please make sure to stay on top of those. You may need to do something like a monthly check-in on your postdocs, run a report, online from UC Path so that you can sort of stay on top of anybody that's, ending their appointment or anybody that has an anniversary date that is approaching. Here's a chart which describes when your postdoc will obtain a level increase. So if you have a postdoc that's hired between October 1st and April 1st, then their level update is 10-1. If they are hired between April 2nd and September 30th, then their level update is April 1st. So I like to see things visually. Here's a different representation of that. So I would make sure to keep this handy because it is important when you're filling out the PX1 form. We have a new process that we announced a couple months ago. If you've been here for a while, you know that previously the dean's office would review the PX file and then we would send it over, and then it was the department analyst's job to get the signature on the PX1 form from the postdoc. But we were not obligated, or you were not obligated, to then send that back to us. AP let us know in June that they would like that form to come back to their office. And so now we are asking that when you receive the final PX form with the dean's signature, that you then turn around and make sure to get the postdoc signature on the form, and then retain a copy for you, provide a copy to the postdoc, and then send a copy of the file with that signed PX1 form in it. Send it back to your dean's analyst so that we can get it back to AP. And there are a couple pages that require their signature or initial. So make sure that if your PX1 form will automatically populate extra pages, make sure to look at those extra pages because you'll see at the very bottom right hand that it needs the initial. I think it's just the initial appointment file that needs initial on page 2 and 3, as well as the PX1 form. I believe if it's a reappointment or a revision, you just need the postdoc signature on page 1. I could be wrong. So double check that for me. Okay, we're going to go over appointment files. Does anybody have any questions about what I just covered? Or any questions in general about postdocs? Okay, we're going to go over appointment file tips. As always, we say this a lot, but just want to remind you again, as always, please use a new checklist each time that you put a file together. AP very often revises their forms and they don't always let us know. And so going online and downloading a new form is always the best practice. So make sure you visit AP's postdoc page, review the checklist, download the current forms before you get started on putting the file together. Please make sure to fill out that form completely and accurately, and we're going to go over a sample form in a couple minutes. When you do fill it out, just make sure you look at it one more time too to make sure that it makes sense, because as you know, the more you look at it, the more you might kind of see something that you missed, and if it comes to the dean's office with errors, we have to send it back, and then it delays the appointment approval timeframe. Something really important that I want to let you know is please do not leave the months of prior service box blank. If the postdoc doesn't have previous months of service, just put a 0 in there, and make sure that you compare. The third point here is compare the CV to what you're putting on the PX1 form. So make sure that you look at the CV and look for clues to see if they've ever had a postdoc appointment in the past. So if they clearly have not, go ahead and enter 0. If they might have, maybe they have a research appointment somewhere right after they got their postdoc, make sure to ask them, hey, did you ever have any postdoc service? That will help you fill out the form accurately. The other thing I want to let you know is when you're reviewing the CV, make sure that the appointee or the postdoc that you're hiring lists the month and year of any prior experience, especially if they say they were a postdoc or a research assistant in somebody's lab just after getting their PhD. The reason for this is because this might count as a postdoc experience, and if it does, we need to be able to count the months of service that they had at that other institution. I have received a file in the past where the postdoc CV said something like, January 2020 to present, and we were appointing them in July. And so the analyst thought, oh, well, to present means June. So that's 6 months of experience. A couple years later, the postdoc came back and said, no, it wasn't really to present. It wasn't till June. It was like January to April. So I only had 4 months of experience, and we had to revise this person's whole appointment to correctly account for the months of service that he had, and we had to grant him an additional 2 months at the end of his 3 or 4 year appointment timeline. All this to say, it's very important to know exactly how many months and years that they spend in any previous work experience, especially if it was a postdoc experience. We do often get people or postdocs that put things like research assistant on their CV. If you see something like that, just make sure to go back and ask the candidate, was this a postdoctoral position? Was it formal training with a mentor, or was it with industry? What kind of position was it? Just make sure to clarify if there's anything gray on the CV. And then lastly, I already mentioned this, but make sure to review the PX for accuracy and completeness. There are green bars on the PX form. They have some helpful hints and tips, so make sure that you read those when you're putting your file together, your PX form together. That green bar will let you know that if it's a postdoc paid direct or fellow, you will need an agency award letter. So make sure that if that's the case, that you are attaching that to the file. If you have an agency award letter, make sure that the information in the letter matches what's on the PX form. And then the last bullet point here, if you have a split title, make sure that the assigned percentages, the percentages assigned to the employee title and the fellow or paid direct title, make sure that it makes sense. And I skipped one, but make sure if you have a fellow or paid direct that the appointment period for that title, fellow or paid direct, it must match the length of the funding. So you can't give somebody a 2-year fellow appointment if they only have 1 year worth of funding on the agency letter. Okay, so make sure to look out for that. And then number 5 is just review the checklist again prior to sending the file. Make sure you have everything that you need in the file before sending it to the dean's analyst. And so before I go to the next slide, I just want to reiterate, these 2 slides were put together as sort of like a checklist. So if you do put a postdoc file together, if you don't remember anything else, just refer to these two slides, this one and this one, as well as the next one I'm about to go over, you know, until you get the hang of it, because they do get a little bit complicated sometimes, especially counting the months of service, figuring out the start and end dates. It does get confusing when you have a split title. So just kind of familiarize yourself with these few slides, and I think that would help. Okay, the next most important thing is, how do we count months of prior service? Again, as I mentioned, what you are looking for is in the CV, you're looking for any prior postdoc appointments. Anything that says postdoc fellow, research fellow. If you see something that says research assistant and it happened right after they got their PhD, reach out to the postdoc and find out if that was a formal postdoctoral program. And then what we do is we look at the months. So the months of experience starts with their first month on their CV, and we count the middle of the month as one full month. So for example, if somebody started January 15th, we count that as month one. And if they ended their postdoc experience on June 29th, we count that as one full month. So January to June would be 6 months. And let's say in this example, I'm using a totally different example than what I have here, but let's say in that example, let's say somebody ended their old postdoc appointment at UCLA on June 29th, and we hire them on June 30th. We start counting the next month in July. So we don't double count June. So they were at UCLA from January to June, and then we count starting on the next month, July, August, September. Okay, and on that PX1 form, when we're putting it together, we say they had a full 6 months, you know, prior to their begin date. So this is again where it's very handy to know exactly when they are ending that prior postdoc experience, because if you're putting that file together in like May, well, as of May, they have 5 months of experience, but by the time they get here and start with us, they're going to have 6 full months of experience. So it's important to count that accurately on the CV and have it accurate on the PX1 form. And if you ever have questions, by the way, just reach out to your dean's analyst. We can always help you, you know, figure out an accurate count. Okay, so now we're going to go through some scenarios and special situations. As I mentioned before, so the question here is, what happens when the department hires a postdoc fellow or a postdoc paid direct, and the pay obtained from the other institution is less than the UCI scale rate? If that's the case, then we need to provide them a supplement. And we do that by supplementing with the postdoc employee title code. And so the total pay must meet at least the minimum rate of pay for the assigned level. So if they have 0 months of postdoc experience and they're coming to us with $50,000 worth of funding from this other institution, we need to supplement, you know, up to the minimum base pay rate for that level 0 on the scale. The department can choose to pay above the minimum rate in all cases, either a postdoc employee, a postdoc fellow, postdoc paid direct. The department can pay above the minimum rate. However, if they do that, just know that every year when that postdoc gets their level increase and pay increase, that pay increase must include at least a 3% pay increase or the minimum of the next level, whichever is greater. And if there's ever a time when they are below the range adjusted rate, so if they got their scale increase on 4.1 and then on 10.1 the range increases, they will be matched to whatever the next level of pay rate is, whichever is greater. So just keep that in mind. Okay, here's another special situation that comes up fairly often. Sometimes postdocs don't have their degree in hand when we are getting ready to hire them. So sometimes they are just in the middle of defending their, you know, their thesis, or they have just defended it, but they don't have that paper in their hand that says, you know, I have my PhD. If that's the case, we have a few acceptable documents that we can take, and your dean's analyst will probably ask for something in the file. if they're, if they've just recently gotten their postdoc degree, their PhD degree, or if they're like just about to get it, we can take a copy of the degree, or we can take a letter of the granting institution with the PhD conferral date. If the candidate does not have one of those, then we have a couple other options. If they graduate from UCI and they get their PhD from UCI, you can contact Andrea Bennigan in Grad Division, and she can help you get a degree certification letter. If they're from another institution, you can get either the degree or a letter from the granting institution that has the PhD conferral date. Or if they have like a grad division or an equivalent office, they can write a letter that confirms either the date that the archive will accept the dissertation paperwork, or the date that their office accepts final degree paperwork, or they can assign an individual graduation date. Any of these things are acceptable. So again, this is another slide to keep handy. If you have that situation where you have someone that just recently got their PhD or is just about to get their PhD right before they start the appointment, these are some of the pieces of evidence that you can obtain and include in the file so that the dean's office can move forward with processing the appointment. Any questions about this or anything I've gone over so far? Okay. So now we're going to go over a sample PX1 form with a split title. And we have had a recent change, which I'll go over with you. So in this example, we are assuming that the paid direct funding for this individual is a full 2 years. We have the agency letter. We're also assuming that they have a visa end date that ends on 3/31/25. In this case, the paid direct funding, if you can see here on the form, is $50,000, and it's less than the minimum on the UCI scale, and the department wants to pay more than the UCI scale rate. So the department wants to pay a total of $65,000 annually. And so this is how we would show that on the PX1 form. So you'll notice right at the top, we have the postdoc's name, our school's name, the department. It's an initial appointment. This is their initial hire date, and the analyst has filled out what date they're eligible for an experience level increase. This is the visa type, the visa end date, and all the information up here. They don't have any previous postdoctoral training, so the analyst has filled out 0 right here. And then this is that green bar that I was telling you about. So postdoctoral scholar employee, minimum of 2 years. That's a tip. We can't appoint them less than 2 years initially. Postdoctoral scholar fellow, paid direct, match the length of funding, attach agency award letter. So in this example, like I said, we have a 2-year period of time that we are funded in this with the paid direct. The change that we have come to is previously we have always been told that the appointment length must match the visa. And so if you attended my presentation back in June, I had this text here that said the appointment length is limited by the visa, but we've had a change. The appointment length is now no longer limited by the visa. So I've crossed out the old text. AP has let us know that we have to give a 2-year initial appointment regardless of any visa end date. I don't know if that's going to change in the future, but that's what they had told us about a month or so ago. So you might have gotten feedback on that already from your dean's analyst, but just keep that in mind. That's a change from what we've been doing previously. I also don't know if this applies, by the way, side note, I don't know if this applies to specialists too. If anybody wants to tell me in the chat if they've had that sent back. I don't think AP didn't give us the feedback for specialists. They just told us this about the postdocs. So keep that in mind. Okay, moving down towards the middle of the form, you'll notice that I have the percent time assigned here next to the funding rate. This number here in the percent time column should be a whole percent. So it's not a decimal. So it's usually 2 numbers, a decimal, and then you can go up to 2 numbers after the decimal as well. So we want to see 76.93%, not 0.7693. That's how I've noted it here. And after you've assigned those percentages, make sure that you do the calculations to make sure that that number makes sense, please. Also, you'll note here, I had to make edits to my previous presentation, but you'll see that I noted each line is 1 year. So I have the first year, 76.93% is assigned to the annual salary of the annual paid direct salary of $50,000. The begin date of the appointment is 4/10/23, and then the end of that first year is 4/9/24. And then they start on level 1 in the middle of this appointment here. And so by the time they start their second year appointment on 4/9/24, they're going to be at level 1. And the paid direct, let's pretend it stays the same rate. It might go up, but if it does stay the same rate, you would include the same number here. And then the end of the 2-year appointment is here, 4/9/25. I purposely kept the percent blank here because what's going to end up happening is there might be a range adjustment to our scale that might affect the proportion of like the percent that you assign to the supplemental pay employee. Okay. The other thing you'll notice is that there are only, on my example, there are 3 lines on this form. AP has now revised the form so that there are only 2 lines on the PX1 form. If you've ever had a split title before, you know that 2 lines does not capture what we need to capture on the form. What AP has told us is that if you need additional lines, that you use an additional PX1 form and add it to the back. So realistically, this level 1 would be on a second page. Okay, and I would show level 1 postdoc paid direct, the percent, the pay, the time frame, and then again, level 1 postdoc employee, the percent, the pay, and the time frame. I included a little note here on how I got the percent, because if you're math challenged like me, I need notes. If you ever need help figuring it out, please contact your dean's analyst or me, and we can look at it together and figure out what the number should be, because we need to make sure that it makes sense. Does anybody have questions on this page so far?
I just have a quick comment. Do you think that it would be okay to, if we're going to add additional pages, to make a comment on the form, like add, see additional page 2 or something for the additional lines? Okay.
Yes, that's a great comment. Yes, I think that's a good idea. So like you could even, go into Adobe or whatever PDF editor and add a comment here that says page 1 of 2 somewhere on the page. I'm planning on meeting with AP in the next couple weeks, if they'll meet with me, and ask them some of these questions. So hopefully we'll have a little bit of clarification. And I'm hoping to explain to them that 2 lines is really not sufficient, and maybe we can come up with some other way to show this a little bit better. I don't know if they'll do that, but yeah, page 1 of 2 or continued on next page is a great idea. Additionally, if you do have more than 1 page, you do have to fill out everything on the top and everything on the bottom. You do have to have your chair or PI and the postdoc sign each of those documents, because it is a contract. So we need them to sign to acknowledge that they know that this is their full appointment on each page. And so this is what the bottom of the page looks like. So your PI, your chair will sign here. We don't always have to have the PI signature, but we do have to have the chair signature. So if you do not have the PI signature, that's okay, but we will send it back if there's no chair signature on the form. And so once this top portion of the form is completed, you can fill out this section of the form here that specifies where the postdoc will be working. You do not have them sign here, and I recommend that you leave this date here blank for the time being. And so once all that's completed, send it to your dean's analyst. The dean's analyst will review. If there are changes needed, then we'll let you know what those are. If there's no change needed, then we will send it forward to Dr. Yokomori. She reviews it, she'll sign off on it, and then we send it back to you as the analyst. And this is when I recommend adding this date here, because the postdoc has to return it to you within 10 days of receiving the form. So let's say you get this approved PX1 from our office on, what day is it today? Let's say you get it on August 25th and you hand it to your postdoc on August 26th. They have 10 days, ideally 10 business days. So you give them that date on here of when they need to return it to you by. Now, previously, our office announced to everybody that we would like the form back within 10 days of sending it to you. Clearly, if your postdoc takes the full 10 days to sign the form, we won't get it back within 10 days, but we do ask, please, that you make sure that once you get that postdoc signature on the form, that you turn around and just send it right back to us. This helps us, it helps AP, it helps everybody, because that way we all have copies of the signed form. So again, once your postdoc signs, keep a copy for your department records, give a copy to the postdoc if they haven't already retained a copy, and then send one copy over to your dean's analyst. And if there is a page 2 and 3, please make sure that they initial those as well. Okay. This is a special situation regarding postdoc extensions. I'm not going to read into this too much, because this was a previous example when we were limited by the visa end date. So just know, if there's any discrepancy or any kind of offset or extension needed due to like a visa limitation, you would complete a visa extension form, and you just check mark the revision extension button at the top of the PX page. So this is something to look through, but I'm not going to go into too much detail on it right now. Okay, here are some file tips on reappointment files. Very similar to the new appointment file. Download the postdoc PX1 form from AP's page. Don't leave the month of service blank. Please make sure that you're counting the service both at the previous institution, if there was one, and at UCI when you fill that out. Make sure the top of the form makes sense. The top of the form asks for the current appointment. So make sure that it makes sense from what was previously approved, and make sure that it matches what's in payroll. And then, of course, review the CV, make sure that it's current. Excuse me, a lot of times we get CVs, like old CVs, we might get the CV attached that was used when the postdoc was hired previously with us. So, if it doesn't have the UCI experience on the CV, please send it back to the postdoc and ask them to revise their CV. It should be a current CV. And then I mentioned these already. So make sure the prior month's count is accurate, the initial hire date is accurate, current proposed appointment. If anything has changed, as I mentioned, if you thought that they were going to arrive on July 1st and they ended up arriving on July 15th and you didn't file an extension, you might have to file that extension before you do the reappointment. So just pay attention to those. If you have questions about what exactly is needed, or if you're not sure, please reach out to your dean's analyst and they can advise you. And if you ever need a deep dive, I can always meet with you as well one-on-one. We can go over these things together. Oops, sorry. This is a slide that just describes future range adjustments. If your PI or your chair is asking, or they want to know kind of how the pay rates will change over time, this is what we're projecting out with all of the 10-1 scale increases. So you'll see currently level 0 is 60,000, but on 10-1 that will adjust to 64,480. And in a couple of years, it'll go all the way up to 71,491. So keep this one handy as well. I mentioned this before, but I'll say it again. When your department pays above the minimum salary, so let's say you hire somebody at at level 0, and the minimum pay rate is 60,000, but you want to pay them, the department wants to pay them 65,000, let's say. When that happens, every time they level up, we are obligated to give them at least 3% over their pay rate, or bump them up to the next level, whichever is greater. And I have an example here. Okay, here are some special situations. Sometimes this happens. Oh, sorry, let me pause really quick. Does anybody have questions about anything I just covered with the scale increases or paying above the minimum? Anything? Okay. So we'll go over a couple special situations. First one is if you have a postdoc that might be appointed past 60 months. I don't know if I mentioned this explicitly, but you might know postdocs are limited to a 60-month appointment, which means that they cannot be appointed for more than 5 years. And this is across all appointments, not just at UCI. And not just at UCs. So if the postdoc comes to us with 2 years of experience at another institution, then the maximum amount of time that we can give them a postdoc appointment here is 3 years, because 2 + 3 is 5. And it's not just 5 years total, it's 60 months exactly. And this is why, again, it's important to count the months of service accurately and to know exactly when they started and ended at any other institution. In some cases, sometimes we have situations where the PI or the postdoc wants to be appointed beyond 60 months. This is very rare, but it does happen. The VP is in charge of approving that, and she does so in very limited cases. She has said no at times when I thought she would for sure approve it. And then sometimes she comes back and says, yeah, sure. At times when I thought, oh no, this isn't going to get approved. So what we need, if your postdoc or your PI wants to appoint past 60 months, what we need is the reappointment file, clearly showing how many months of service the postdoc previously had, and then how many they will have moving forward. And then we need a memo that is signed by the PI and chair, which includes justification, clear justification, and good justification that explains why they want the postdoc to go beyond 60 months. It also has to include the total number of months that they will have at the end, and the time frame for the extension. So it has to say, dear Vice Provost O'Dowd, I would like so-and-so to, so-and-so has a current appointment that's ending on XYZ date. They will have, 60 months of service at the end of their current appointment. I would like to appoint them for a total of 6 months from this date to that date, and they will obtain 66 months of total service at the end of this time period. The reason why we want to extend this person is because, and then they have to justify it. And then she reviews that and lets us know whether it's okay or not. Has anybody had that situation in their department? No? Okay. Okay. Now, there is a new provision in the postdoc contract, and I want to tell you about it. So previously, in the previous contract, postdocs had an initial appointment of 1 year. We were only obligated to give them that initial appointment for 1 year. And then the next reappointment, we were supposed to give them 2 years, right? In the new contract, it's sort of reversed. We're obligated to give them a 2-year initial appointment, and then every appointment thereafter can be for 1 year. With this new provision in the contract, what it says is that there's a release provision at the 1-year mark of the initial appointment. So what the department could do is give them a 2-year initial appointment, but if they see that it's not working out, they have the option to release this person by the end of the first year, if they want to. The contract says the release is at the university's sole discretion, and it can be for any reason except an unlawful reason. And that release postdoc may obtain future UC employment. It also says that the release should not be a substitute for layoff. So if the reason that you're letting go of the postdoc is because there's no funding, that we can't use this release provision for that reason. So you can't let go of someone at the 1-year mark because of lack of funding. You'd have to follow layoff procedures. Okay, and if you are in that situation, please consult with your dean's analyst and we can walk you through it. There are some provisions that I've listed on the side of like how you go about releasing somebody within that first year. They require notice with a minimum of 30 calendar days before the first anniversary date. the release cannot be effected before the 1 year mark. So let's say their first year ends on June 30th. You have to notify them at least 30 days from that date, and you can't release them on June 29th. They have to be released on June 30th. Okay. If the notice provided is less than 30 calendar days before the first anniversary, then you have to extend the appointment by a proportional amount. So if you notify them on June 15th that they're ending on June 30th, you have to give them another 15 days because you didn't give them that full 30-day calendar notice. Okay, so their new appointment end date would be July 15th. And it says here, the last date to issue the notice is 1 year following the date of hire. So using that example again, July 1 to June 30th, if you know that you're going to release someone and you didn't have time to give a 30-day notice, and now it's June 29th, you have to give that notice no later than June 30th. And then you're going to have to give them 30 days pay in lieu of, excuse me, you're going to have to extend the appointment for 30 days to give them that 30-day notice period. I hope that wasn't too confusing how I said it, but basically you can, the department can let them go for a good cause, a lawful reason within that first year time frame, and they have to notify the postdoc 30 days before the end of their appointment. That's my last slide. Does anybody have any questions? Okay, if there's no questions, I'll let you go. We're just under an hour. If you think of anything, please let me know and I can clarify for you or make sure to add things to my slides if you think I missed something. I'm going to stop recording now.